no, I was just explaining the kind of framing of how this song came to be, which is that we found out that we somehow simultaneously had written down the same exact thing, which is that immigration is a little bit like killing your parents. And I was explaining that my great friend Erica Robles Anderson has this motto that success is succession, and that there's a thread that ensures that the past and the future are connected. And I often find that immigration is kind of like cutting this in the middle, and creates a whole new, it's like in the multiverse theory, it creates a whole different branch of events. Stella, tell us first, let's talk about your piece, because you were the prompt for this. How did that piece come to be? What happened?
So it's something that I felt like I had been restraining in me for a long time. And I've been away from home for 13 years. I moved to the UK when I finished high school. I came to London to study, and then I stayed there. I never went back. And in the last few years, I don't know exactly how it happens. I guess because I've been growing older and just maturing, and just things slow down the older you grow. And I realized that it's really how painful it is for me to just completely erase my home and my family and my home country and all the things that I've learned from there, completely erase them because they don't work for me here. They don't help me in my career here. They don't help me in the person I want to be. They make me weak in a lot of ways. They make me weak because I feel so sad. And being sad is not something that makes you, it doesn't help you achieve the things you want to achieve. And I was thinking how sad I am, because I am a person who's I was very close to my family when I was growing up. I'm still close to them. I love my country. I love Greece. But there is simply no way for me to go back and do the kind of career I'm doing. I just can't do it. And I also love so many things about being here. So I was feeling like, oh, I had to kill my parents. I had to kill the thing I love the most about my upbringing and about myself, really, to be able to do what I'm doing here. And that's the only way to be a successful immigrant, because if you don't do that, then you're not going to be successful. You're always going to be melancholic about what you left behind. You're always going to be kept behind by all of these things that are good in your country, but they're not necessarily serving you. And I imagine that you had something similar with your life.
And you see that, especially like the first time I moved to London, I also immigrated 13 years ago. And I remember the first time I moved into this PhD residence hall at Goldsmiths University, I was on a scholarship there. And you see the different strategies of different people, even different floors of how they are dealing with displacement. And this is not even a refugee camp. I can imagine that if the displacement is violent, then this thing is on steroids. Like a kind of disclaimer that here we are talking about a very peacetime version, and often kind of consensual, voluntary immigration, right? This is not like we were chased away from Ukraine or Syria, and we want to have the humility around this. Like this is like problems that we gave ourselves because of how we deemed culture and the economy and our prospects, et cetera, et cetera. Like I walk into my residence hall, and there is the Brazilian girl who's like super close with her mom, and they talk every day for 3 hours. Like she's not going to stay in the UK. There is the California girl who is so unhappy with how not woke things are in the UK. She's African American. She's not used to some of the things that in the UK still count as okay to be said and done. She's often frustrated. There is the Italian girl who brings the sausage in her purse and sits on the radiator because it's cold, only talks Italian. There is the Hong Kong group that cook together every day. They are like looking for jobs. It's like, they are going to stay because they have really good strategies, right? They brought home here, but they are not like, they are managing their transition. And then you see, for us, it was the Greeks, like they arrived immediately, job, boyfriend, car, let's go. And you're like, okay, they are not going to go back. They came almost, I think most people immigrate with a plan, but then it's a little bit like looking for an apartment. Like there are two stages. It's a dual personality test, looking for an apartment. The first part of this personality test is who you think you are. And the second part is who you actually are. And in the process, you will find out both. And it's the same with, like, I lived in France. As a Hungarian person, I lived in England. I lived in Belgium. I lived in Lisbon. Now I'm in the US. And all of these places came with their own package. You know, nothing is perfect, but there is a fit. So I'm very interested in that. And what really struck me strongly about your piece is that there is a violence to leaving.
Yeah, there is
Even
violence.
just leaving somebody, like a relationship, like you have to severe something that is not like in life, things kind of just want to like be like half solved. And you have to go there with your surgeon's knife and be like, no, we will have to cut this because
You are killing things that you have very warm feelings about, that you may love some of the time, and sometimes you may even hate them. Like how emotional I am, for example. It's something that it's both very valuable to me, but also I hate it at times because it tortures me. Or how I'm so
they
people
tell you
oriented.
that you are intense in the UK. They always told me I was
Exactly.
intense.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
you haven't seen nothing yet. I'm just ordering coffee. Calm down, you know.
Yeah.
This is nothing.
Yeah, and you have to, and that is why it feels like, and when you are suppressing these bits of yourself, it does feel to me like I'm killing my parents. It feels like I am denying my parents' existence. And I guess this is why, from my parents' point of view, you know, as much as I'm saying that my mom is insane, I say that a lot in my Substack, and she is. But at the same time,
Your
I can feel
Substack,
that.
she reads that. You think she's insane?
She doesn't speak English, it's fine. She doesn't.
Perfect. Oh my God, I love that.
That
Yeah.
is why I get to
Move
write like
somewhere where
this.
they don't speak the language. It's perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
I
language is
don't.
another part of this, right? That, you know, when you realize that, oh, I will never have ever people in my life who understand me ever again because I can't explain myself as well in English, however well I may speak
Yeah,
French. I will never have that shared context. And it's a kind of,
sad.
this is why when people are hating on immigrants, I'm like, it's so hard that nobody does it if they don't have to. Like, people might look like it's a expat, la la la. Sure, that exists. But a friend of mine in London told me that all immigrants are refugees. You don't do this to yourself unless
Yeah, you live,
very
you're
good
living
visa.
from, you're escaping from something. What is your relationship with your parents? Because you live very far away from them. And that is one of the reasons why with the US, when I was, you know, I would find it so scary.
The US is scary for that reason. And one of the reasons for me to, to have been really only truly decided to come when I was 35. So it really took my sweet little time there. And I had come a lot visiting before I was like, okay, let's try it. One reason is because US immigration is like living with a chronic disease. So you give yourself this thing that will take up 40% of your time. It's going to cost you a lot of money and stress on experts. There will be a lot of uncertainties, and you can die anytime. So it really is only comparable to, and some people have to do immigration whilst living with a chronic disease. So I can't even imagine, that how that goes. But I also had this fear of like getting lost. And what's interesting and why I started my American Innocence project is to write what actually happened, because what I had anticipated, that's not how it really felt or how it changed my relationship with my background. And different layers of American culture opened up to me. Gender is very different here. I'm just writing about that now. Status is very different. People's worth is very differently calculated in a very different way. I think in Europe it's very binary, like you either count as a valuable member of society or not. In the US, it has all these like myriads of layers and negotiations because there's success plurality, right? I mean, the UK, it's like either you went to Oxford and Cambridge or shut the fuck up, right? These are the two categories. There are two columns in the Excel sheet. In the US, there are many, right? And people calculate these little, like they say about LA people that they always ask for your zip code, the postcode, because that's kind of the algorithmic configuration of like your worth as a person. And I think that somehow exists in the US as well. And I write a lot about mentorship, and one of the things that I always kind of laugh at myself in a sad way, that if you build your life outside traditional institutions, you will still have gatekeepers, but now you're like out in the Wild West. You have to find your own gatekeepers. You have to understand your own status or progress through them. It's all like you have no institutional protection. And I think the US is a little bit like that at scale, that you don't have traditional classes because they never had a royalty. And so everything is up for grabs. And there's a lot of fakeness as well, a lot of projection. It's really hard, I think, for a newbie like myself. And my instinct, honestly, is to just check out of it and be like, you guys deal with this. This is can take
Too
up
much.
your whole life,
Is
How
it
do you
is
deal
it
with the UK in this sense? Because it's really, I mean, you're a beautiful, very talented woman, so I guess that gives you some advantage. And you also come from like a sexy country, which is very important in the UK. If you're a hot woman, you have to be French or Greek or Italian, and then you can
yeah,
marry
that's it.
well. If you're
Mm.
like Croatian, forget about it.
They
Nobody
can't they
will be
can't
like,
do it.
oh, my hot Croatian girlfriend. Yeah, they are very specific about these things. You can even
Like
smoke, no? Like you are even allowed, like you really can. Good wine, like people can so say that. Yeah.
they like their Mediterranean dream for sure. I think the way I dealt with it is I just and that's how I've dealt with a lot of generally that's how I deal with rejection with in my life since I was a child. I act like I didn't I like I don't get it, like I act like I can't understand it completely, like I let it just go over me. And I did that from the very beginning because it takes such a long time to become truly assimilated and to really understand how to behave and to complete what we're talking about, which is killing your parents and all of that. That takes time. It takes time to leave behind all of these habits that rub British people the wrong way. And for me, the way to do it was to just pretend like to be extremely forgiving with myself whenever I would commit a faux pas, whenever I would do something not the done way, I would just try to forget about it as soon as possible, just act like it never happened, make it better the next time, but it's fine. Like never, I would try to never stop myself from moving forward just because I had been found out to be the weird foreign whatever person. So especially with the kind of job that I do, with the kind of career that I'm pursuing, being in politics and in media in the UK, if you stop yourself, if you take yourself out of the game because you feel like you have sinned by being an awkward foreigner from a very outspoken country, which I'm sure you've had the same problem. We come from countries where communication is extremely blunt, it's extremely emotional, it's extremely intense, dramatic. And this is something that here, it can be really misunderstood. It can be very off-putting for people. And it is very easy for you to feel like I'm a terrible person. I'm such a horrible, rude human being. And I always remind myself, it's okay. I'm not a rude human being. I'm actually extremely kind in all of these other ways, which are completely not present in the culture here. It's just so happened that in my country, this is considered a normal thing, and it's fine. I've learned from it, and we move.
Can you give us some example? And by the way, guys, this is a salon, so I guess you all voted with your feet and you're here today instead of doing a million other things that the internet wants you to do and your family and your loved ones. Thank you for being here. This is also for you. So we want to hear who you
We
are,
definitely
you're
want to hear
calling
from you.
in. Feel free to share anything in the chat. Raise your hand if you want to jump in. This is like as much about you as it is about us. We're just like laying the groundwork here to kind of like create a little bit of a framework for what we want to talk about. I would love to hear some sorry. I would love to hear some examples, Stella. Like, do you have any faux pas that could have ended up in Monty Python and instead built into your Bildungsroman?
Um, yeah, like a lot of things which have to do with like how you invite people to things and how quickly you ask people to go for a drink or for a coffee, and how quickly you feel like you are friends with people, and how quickly you feel like you can just ask them personal questions. One that springs to mind is I was working in the office of a politician, and I was with some older women from her office. And one of them was she was complaining about a health problem that she was facing. And in Greece, when somebody says something about a health problem that they have, when they mention they have a health problem, you take that as a signal that I want you to ask, I want you to be nosy, I want you to ask me questions so that I complain about it. So I asked her, oh, what was the accident? What happened? Tell me. And the other older woman just looks at me as if I have just like taken a knife out and like stabbed her. And so I was like, why are you being so nosy? Why are you asking questions? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I just backed off immediately. I mean, the two of them, they were quite strict. They had this very strict British, stiff upper lip way about them. But I thought I didn't care to know details about her health thing. I was just trying to be polite, literally. And that was taken as extremely rude. Yeah. But yeah, I would love to
I
hear from
love
people.
this. That's so hilarious.
Yeah.
You're like, no, no, in my country, this means you want me to ask about
Yeah.
your liver. Like, why else
Yeah.
did you bring this up?
Yeah, and I don't do you think that I have any appetite to hear to you talking to me about your
Nobody
boring leg
cares.
injury? No.
Yeah, it's a different thing from like seeing somebody coming in with the crutches and like a broken foot, and you ask questions about it, and maybe it's an overstep. It's interesting with regard to pregnancy. Like one of the things that people told me when I moved to the UK, and I think that's proving very useful in America as well. Like even if a woman is on a stretcher screaming for an
Yes.
epidural, you never ask her when she's due. Because if she's not pregnant, you really, really do have a problem. And so I got into this situation. I was in New York last year, and I'm sitting with the editor-in-chief of this magazine, and we're like partnering up for Interintellect. And she's like very, very pregnant. And to give you an idea, this is like Christmas time, and we're in a wine bar. And so I arrived to the wine bar, and there is this lady who is like tiny with this, like her belly was like the same like length as her height. So it was really, really obvious, but I'm like super well trained by this time. I had lived in the UK, like no fucking way I'm seeing anything. And we're like ordering. And like there's this thing of like, you're in a wine bar, like I'm going to get a glass of wine. What do you do with this lady that is clearly pregnant, but we pretend she isn't? And then you have to wait like 30 minutes, talk about everything literally until she's like, oh, and by the way, in like 5 minutes, I will have a baby. And you're like, no, what?
No way, I would have never
Oh
guessed.
my God, I thought you were just fat. You can't say that. So I feel like, yeah, you burn yourself and then you learn. Another faux pas I did that was in the US. I was leading this panel with two female founders. You both know who they are. They are very famous and lovely human beings. And I'm an idiot, right? So I run Interact. I'm surrounded by people who are like complete nerds. Everybody like lives with their books or like whatever. You have like some kind of mania. And so, she runs her company. It's a very, very cool, like Carta company. And I'm like, so what science fiction books inspired you? Like something I would ask anybody on Interact, because clearly, you were a child and you read some science fiction book or you were watching a series and, and she's like, I don't have time to read. And it becomes this whole thing. So since then, I'm like, don't assume, even if somebody is reading a book in front of you, don't assume they are a reader. If they are an Interact, yes, because they voted with their feet, like you guys. But if it's like a random event that I'm not affiliated with, just never ask people how many books they read. Or even if they have read one, because they might hear it as like a quantitative question. So yeah, but who knows? We're trying to do a good job for humans, and sometimes it's just not happening.
You know what I would love to hear? I don't know how many, I imagine that there will be a lot of people who are also immigrants on this call, but I would love to hear both, obviously, other immigrants who've had similar experiences, but even there is anyone who has experiences from their own country where they were talking to other immigrants and they were like, oh, this person is being really weird. Or I guess you can be an immigrant yourself and see like other immigrants doing things that you are thinking, this is not going to serve you well, mate. This is going to be a burden for you. If anyone wants to jump in.
Or when the parents are, when you feel, I think this is also something that happens in the process of killing your parents, that you have more experience and you are more enlightened, or diverse in your thinking because you've lived in multiple places, whereas maybe your parents have only lived in one place, you know, and what to do with that hierarchy.
I mean, this is something that makes my mom very sad. Very angry, rather, not sad, because she feels that her authority is no longer respected.
I guess, can I jump in? I guess
Yeah.
I'm Russell. I'm American, but I've been living in Spain for the past 2 years. So in a sense, I've immigrated to Spain. I happen to be in the US right now, and I'm talking to my neighbor here in rural New Hampshire, who lived in the UK for 15 years. And 15 years, and he told me, I'm so glad we moved back. And the example he gave me was that he can't just walk into a gas station in the UK and like crack a random joke with the gas station owner because he's just not sure if he's going to have the same like huge lifetime of cultural context that this guy has. And he's happy to be back in rural New Hampshire where he just does have that. And I guess what he's saying to me is like he felt this alienation even after 15 years. I don't
But
know if it even matters if you kill your parents or don't kill your parents. Why are you like, do you really have to sever yourself from all that that symbolizes, even if you're going to continue to have alienation even after 15 years? Am I going to be living in Spain for 15 years and kind of like still feel a sense of alienation, ultimately want to return to the US? Something I'm kind of curious about if I'm going to follow his path.
doesn't that have to do though with whether you have a choice or not in terms of, you know, what is most important for you?
What do you mean by have a choice or not?
Like for me, the reason why I can't go to Greece is because I can't go back to Greece is because my career is dead if I go back to Greece. I work in British politics and British media. I can continue writing, but apart from that,
It's a good call. I mean, like, let's just stipulate you're like me, you can kind of be anywhere. Anna, I think you can kind of be anywhere. I mean, there's maybe some cities where it's better for you to be.
I can't go back to Greece for me. But for you, why wouldn't you go back to the US if that is,
But
why are you in the US?
that's the difference between like what I mean. We can discuss whether that's even a real difference between expats and immigrants, right? Like an immigrant goes somewhere and you have a very specific goal, either to integrate into that society because for whatever reason it didn't work for you where you're from, or temporarily because you want to go to a third place and this is like a necessary intermediary step. Whereas an expat can be somebody who's quite location independent, although not necessary. Like plenty of expats move somewhere and open a restaurant or do a business, whatever. But there, I think that it's the voluntariness, and I think that's very correct what Stella you said. Are you going from an okay situation to a better one? For lifestyle, culture, language immersion, you have kids and you want to raise them in a specific environment. All of these are completely valid reasons. And being an expat actually is also quite difficult. So it's not like just because there is a beach or something, it doesn't make it, you know, immediate. Whereas an immigrant is, for me, there's also some kind of hardship involved, which can be sometimes just that. I mean, now that there's all this talk around H-1B visas, for a lot of my friends, it's that they came when they were 18, they came of age here, all of their friends are here, their achievement is here, their career is here, you know, they have never been anywhere else as adults. And they are, in that sense, economically American. So there are very, very different levels. For me, yeah, I mean, I also can't go back. That would not kill my parents. That would kill me in some sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very complicated. But I think nobody subjects themselves to this unless they have to. Is my kind of motto about it. The hierarchical thing of like, for me, it's not really with my parents, but I went back to Budapest last year, 1.5 years ago, because my dad was dying. He died while I was there. And it was very strange, like to go back after years, because my life was in a weird way accelerated. Like so many things had happened to me, interintellect, various countries, all these kind of grandiose experiences. And my friends stayed where they were, where I was, but their lives had accelerated in a different way. They had written more books and had more babies and did all the things that you can afford doing when you don't have to worry about like your residence permit. And they worry about other things. Don't get me wrong, this is not like one is better than the other. But when you're there, the first couple of days, you're just like, you have to align these time scales to find yourself in the other person and that they can find themselves in you. And it's a very weird and interesting time dilation that I found that we almost don't really have words for. The fact that where you are, time works differently from where you are not, and kind of everybody knows.
Yeah.
And friendship and love are like these special things that keep the time together. So when you call up your friend, you actually like bridge not just the space, but the time in a really interesting way. And you can kind of defy physics. And to me, that's as spiritual as I will ever get, but I know that that is real.
I think I'd like to jump in just because I've got a bit of a weird one here in that, so my family's from South Africa and Mozambique, but I grew up in London and now I live in New York. And
You're
for
as very
me,
pathetic as I am. Good.
I think you've still got me beat by a significant margin.
Just wait.
But
Yeah. We'll check back in 2 years. We'll see the scoreboard.
yes. So my mother's from Maputo, which is the capital of Mozambique. She left shortly after independence, as did my grandmother. My grandfather stayed. So my grandmother lives most of her life in Mozambique under the Portuguese colony. My mother spent her teenage years, like childhood to teenage years, under the colony, and then sort of went back a couple of times over the years since then, and then stopped. And then I used to go to visit my grandfather, so I've only ever known the independent Mozambique. And I've traveled all over like independent Mozambique, but obviously when we argue viciously now, not viciously, but we like arguing about what Mozambique is like because each of us has a very different impression of it. Like my grandmother mostly still uses the colonial names for things. So we had to go help her pack up her flat. And so I went with my mother in August. And it was just really interesting, my mother trying to take me to places in Maputo. And those places were completely different in the last 50 years. And I was trying to say, Mozambique is like this. And she said, Dan, you grew up in London. You don't understand Mozambique. I was like, you grew up in colonial Mozambique. You don't understand independent Mozambique. And then my grandmother says, neither of you understand Mozambique. I am Mozambican. And for us, we don't agree with that either because, if you spent your entire life under a colony, it's very hard to change your frame of reference for an independent country.
Can I ask the awkward question? In London and in New York City and all of these places, do people, when you tell them about your background, are they ever like, white person, we used to live in a colony, blah, blah, blah? Is that ever weird?
So usually I don't say I'm from Mozambique because lots of people don't know where Mozambique is. So I just say South Africa. And it used to be that they'd say, South Africa, Nelson Mandela. And now they say, South Africa, Elon Musk. So that's a significant downgrade. So I'm like, I'm sorry.
That's hilarious. When my great grandmother died, we found a book that she had forgotten to take back to the library about 80 years earlier. And it was a bit of a problem because the country in which she rented the book no longer existed. So it's not just that the library didn't exist, it's that the country was like that city was now in a different country. So yeah, Austro-Hungarian monarchy also hits hard,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Same with Mozambique. My mother was born in the overseas province of Mozambique, but it's now the country of Mozambique.
There you go.
So,
Thank
Often
colonists and powers
yes.
for carving up land and doing a great grandchildren a great disfavor. But that's so funny. I mean, Tyler Cowen was just on my podcast, and we were talking about Budapest, and I'm like, my instinct is like, oh, go when I'm there, and I will like tell you about and then I realized like I have no idea. Like sometimes people email me, and I'm like, I haven't lived there since 2011, basically 2012. I can tell you what was good then, but maybe ask somebody who actually lives there.
But you kind of drag these identities around with you wherever you go, right? Whether you like to or not. So if you say South Africa, the people around you say Nelson Mandela. Stella, if you say Greece, like all of us have an idea of what we think that says about you. If I say American, everyone has an idea of what that says about me. So, like, how do you kill your parents in a metaphorical sense? How do you like sever the thing? How do you decide what to sever when you carry like the cultural baggage of your country, fair or not, around the world with you, no
You have to
matter
come from Hungary or Mozambique that nobody knows anything about, and it's great. It's just a blank.
I think
It
being a
depends on
white
how much
person
you
with, oh,
need
sorry,
to.
so go on, Stella.
No, I was just I think that it depends on how much you need to do that. So I know, for example, a lot of people who really radically change their accent. I'm not one of them because I'm just not capable of doing that. Even though I've lived here for 13 years now, I still have a very Greek accent. But I know people who you wouldn't be able to tell that they weren't born in the UK. And it's because they have entirely changed their accent. And then if all of your friends are foreign and you spend your time being completely entangled with the life of the place you're from, you no longer resemble someone from wherever it is that you are.
but you're holding on to your accent on purpose, or why
No,
you're not holding on to it on purpose?
no.
You can't change.
It's not the
I
accent.
have an
You have to speak like this to fit into the UK. So you have to go out. It's not the accent. You have to just like we have to work on our sopranos.
I have a comment on the idea of killing our parents and what to choose, like how to choose that. So I'm Jen. I grew up in Toronto. I was born in China and I moved there when I was 6. So it's really interesting to hear you guys talk as like first generation immigrants because I'm a second generation immigrant. But I grew up in like a very heavily Chinese suburb, and my parents but like mostly worked in the Chinese community. So it was like also very like I do feel like going to university and then now like sort of like working in like a very like predominantly more white like sort of area. There was like a little bit of a culture clash, but I was thinking about this recently because I one of my friends who was white visited recently and was talking about basically dating a new girl who was from Hong Kong. And he was like, yeah, and we get along, right? Like she's very practical. I like how on the first date we talk about, where we are in life, if we want to get married, if we want to have kids. Like he was like, it's so practical. And I was like, yeah, I mean, like it looks good on the surface, but there's like a lot of these like cultural things that you might not even realize is like happening underground, and that's like when it gets really, really scary. And he was like, "Yeah, what's an example?" And I told him about I guess this is like not necessarily a faux pas. It's like a thing that I intentionally decided to do in a previous relationship. I was dating someone who was making a lot more money than me, and she said, "I want you to think of our like my money as our money." And I said, if you really do mean that, and I have this money, I feel like I have an obligation to give my parents $2,000 a month. And immediately she was like, I can't do that. And I was like, fair enough, right? But I had to make the ask because if we are actually being genuine about like our cultural expectations, like this is a thing. Like I can't just like not say it, right? Like I had to try because like this is like something that my parents raised me to do. Like I know I have to like take care of them when they're older. Um, and then he was like, that's insane. I have to text her right now and ask like, uh, if she has like, this sort of like obligation to take care of her parents. But I feel like a lot of this, like Stella, you were talking about like the accents thing, and I feel like a lot of this sort of comes down to privilege too. At this point, I'm like assimilated enough and I'm like around enough that I feel like I can be a little bit more choosy about like what parts of my parents I want to kill and which ones I can keep. And I feel like immigrants who are here and they're in a more tenuous position, like they are pushed, like there's like so much more pressure for them to assimilate and try to like suppress all parts, like, you know, like every single little part of where they came from just because it's so necessary for their survival.
I love that. And I think that's also a very important point, that if you immigrate into a place where your name and your physique seems like
Yeah.
the pass, at least from the outside. Like I had this conversation with a friend of mine who is a Southern Indian American, like born in America, that she can't even use her own name on Twitter. Like they don't have enough characters. And that apparently this is, for instance, I'm sure it's the same with Greek names, that sometimes you have like, I mean, Stella, you could totally pass for somebody born in an Anglo country from like Greek origin from like 200 years ago, right? I'm the only Hungarian person with a pronounceable name. This is kind of a weird privilege. And in the UK, I often felt, especially after a couple of years, that I could pass, like people would look at me. And then when I start talking, the whole thing changes. Like you almost feel this like, the screenplay of this scene in this movie is now different. And this is a completely different question for people who a more close-minded person would not associate with locals, especially if you go to like super predominantly mono-ethnic countries. Like if you move as a Central African person into Hungary, so you will be very, very, very visible. And very few people will assume that you were born there. There are many layers to that.
I find very interesting the experience of second generation immigrants who are born to parents who are themselves, very, very fresh, very, very much related to the country they're coming from. And to what extent you, Jen, feel close to your family's heritage and whether you identify with it and whether you feel it's a part of you, and to what extent do you feel it's a part of you because you have willed it into being, because you felt like you wanted to have roots from somewhere other than the cosmopolitan country you were raised in, or to what extent it just intuitively was there, and it, in the same way that for me my background both oppresses and keeps me warm. More it keeps me warm than it oppresses me. That is a very strong word, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. My parents definitely do have very strong ties to the old country, and they wanted to make sure that I also had pretty strong ties, so we would visit every other summer, like basically for the entire summer. Um, and I do feel, and I think there was like a description in like the Interintellect, like description, like, is your old country like a warm blanket or like baby shoes that you've outgrown? Um, I think it's both, but it also feels like very contingent. I am someone who like reads a lot of books, and I remember when I first moved to Canada, the one thing that like immediately made me fall in love with the country was the fact that there were public libraries. Because this didn't exist in China. I don't think they even exist today, but like especially when I first moved here in like 2003. Um, and I was just like, this is amazing. This is a society that is like so rich and it cares so much for its citizens that it allows them to take out and read as many books as they want. And it's not gated behind like being able to pay for books. On the other
I
hand,
love this, but China doesn't have public libraries. What? That can't
nope.
be. Really?
No, yeah. No, it's all just bookstores. And the culture of bookstores are different in that like you can go in and just like read a book and no one really cares. But it's still sort of like, so you have people, they just like go to the bookstore and they like read the books, but they have to be very careful because the books have to like, still like brand new and everything. I don't know if things have like changed, but my understanding is that there still aren't a lot of like public libraries. It's all just bookstores. Yeah.
I was
And then
just at a talk with Dan Wang, who is also born in China, moved to Canada, Canadian Chinese, and was talking about how much books are revered in China, and like there are statues in the little villages for the one person who went to university, and now I'm completely like confused. I have to go and check it out myself. That's all I can do.
Yeah.
Right back.
And then on the other hand, I like when I go back to China, there like China is such like an ancient country and with like so much history that it's actually insane, right? Like when I visit my hometown, I could go to the ancestral shrine that my own family worshipped at for over like hundreds of years. And this is just and so I like when I feel like, oh yeah, I do have like, you know, an affiliation to this land, there's like something very physical there. So I don't feel like it's like all in my head. And then also I'm like kind of like a history nerd, so I do like learning about the history of the place. Um, but still wouldn't move back there. Even though like Dan Wong is completely correct that it's like ridiculously sophisticated these days. Quality of life, if you're like wealthy, is probably better than it is here, but I still wouldn't want to move back just because of the like pretty significant culture gap.
Mm.
Nobody seems to want to move back. I think there is also like an expiration date until which you can go back. Probably there's research on this, and maybe I should have looked it up. But you know, people who will go back in the first couple of years. They never really like put down roots. After a while, you can't. Like if I went back to Budapest I will give you a bigger example. My aunt and uncle, even during communism, they were very successful, very smart, very lucky people. They moved to Vienna in 1980, so still like raging Iron Curtain times. And they had lived there all their careers and lives. And then in older age, they moved back because it's their ancestral land. I don't know, but there is an emotional tie. Probably you can get a much better house for that money in Budapest than in Vienna. But it was like coming to a new country. You're a different kind of immigrant suddenly, and it's a different kind of culture shock. I mean, imagine leaving in 1980 in the middle of communism. Thatcher had just been elected. It's like a different time, and then coming back, I don't know, in like 2008 or something like that. It's very, very different. Anybody we haven't heard from yet? Do you guys want to jump in? Tom, Feridun, I mean, not to like throw the mic at you, you can like duck away. But if you want to add your voice, please do join us.
Yeah, I think I'm British, but I live in Taiwan. I've been an English teacher all my life. That's the only job that I've ever had. So I've taught in Korea and Taiwan and a few other places. It's very it's a little early in the morning here, but I'm not
Thanks
so
for joining. Is it 4:48 a.m.?
Yeah, look at that. How do you know? Yeah,
Because my Taiwan friend, I have to like Zoom with when I want to catch up with him at like ungodly hours. That's how I know. And it's always inconvenient for one of us. Yeah, time zones are also very different, very important in this displacement question. When do you call your mom, in the middle of her night or the middle of your night?
So I mean this country is it's the most liberal Asian country, of course, and there's a tremendous difference in I mean in Korea, all of the foreigners want to leave pretty soon after 1 year, 2 years. Here, everyone I've been here for about 6 years. Everyone is if you meet every foreigner, they've been there for 10 years, 15 years, something like that. But yeah, I don't I think that there was something that Stella wrote, as I remember, somewhere else, not in the article referenced, but somewhere I think you wrote that an immigrant has to be kind of brave and selfish at the same time. It's kind of admirable and not admirable to be an immigrant. I can't remember quite what you wrote, but something like that. I relate to that feeling very much.
Yeah, the person who suffers the most from me being an immigrant is my mother. The person who benefits the most is me. The rest is a bit so and so. That's why I'm immigration neutral. Because yeah, it is a very scary and it's a very difficult thing to do, to be an immigrant. You are literally killing a part of yourself. But at the same time, you are doing it because you are valuing something else more.
And there's also
It's an aggressive thing. It's a very aggressive thing.
But there's a political aspect to that, right? Because say you are, I mean, there's Dennis sharing these stories like regime change and people making immigration different, like immigration choices, decisions based on what's happening in global politics. But there's also a great big question, right? Because some of the smartest, most educated people, unless there is an outright campaign against the intelligentsia, which also sometimes happens under, for instance, a dictatorship or in a war, but usually people with, software engineering degrees and medical degrees and who speak many languages, who are in banking, they can, leave the easiest. Right? It's usually there's a delta, like handy workers can leave very, very easily. Everybody needs tables, and then the kind of creme de la creme, upper echelons of society, if you're a top neurosurgeon, probably, I don't know, Stanford will figure out somehow how to keep you, or Waterloo Hospital. But also these people have the best chance at changing a regime or kind of resisting it, right? And there is, at least in the kind of exodus from Hungary after the Fidesz takeover, was this kind of gradual attrition. At the beginning, there were all these political movements. Everybody was super active. The bank people left immediately, so finance fled very quickly. But everybody else, like journalists, translators, teachers, academics, like people who had a cultural voice, were very adamant at like holding against the political push. And then they kind of like tired out people in a decade. It's a long process, right? And then people leave. And then what happens to the country is that the very people who, I mean, it happens within countries as well, like how a village is depopulated, that first, people try to like start a hotel, a restaurant, do a business, or like something. And then those people leave easiest to the cities, and the ones who stay may not have the necessary toolkit or education to do anything about it. So you have these very strange vicious cycles as well.
Isn't that kind of a new feature, though? It's something that's happened since globalization. Like pre-2000, you couldn't leave as easily. So, like in the 70s, just
Yeah.
I read about stories from South Africa, and just getting out from South Africa to Europe was a mission.
Yeah.
But now, when like you can just take a Ryanair plane from Hungary to London, it's much easier. So it's kind of a new phenomenon that the intelligentsia can leave at the drop of a hat, and we're going to have to figure out what happens with those countries going forward.
I mean, I think it's more like there are historical waves, because I don't know, if you were a dissenting intellectual in ancient Rome, they would like send you to one of the provinces, and then you would be like in Anatolia. If you were a heretic in France or England, you either would end up on a on a pile of wood in the village square, or in a ship to America. So I think many different eras deal with a version of this problem. Larissa McFarquhar writes about this, wonderful writer about the American South, and how a lot of people who were involved in the civil rights movement basically faced the same choice. Am I going to move to Michigan, New England, Boston? Am I going to stay and fight? And the people who actually, affected those great civil revolutions in America were the people who were like, no, I want to live in Alabama, and this can't continue. I'm sure there is like a South African equivalent as well of people who stayed and risked their lives and imprisonment, and made all those very different. For me, that was a sorry. For me, that was a big dilemma when I left.
Yeah, I kind of feel like not moving from your country is actually like a very contingent and modern thing. I was recently reading on the shortness of life by Seneca, who was like writing in like 0 BC, and there's like a letter that he writes where he's trying to console his mother because he just got exiled, and he was like, well, if you look at it logically, right, like the place that I'm on right now, it kind of sucks because I don't want to be here and it's like much colder compared to Rome, but um if I look around me, there's a lot of people who are here voluntarily because they like the colder weather or because there's like better opportunities than they had back home. And if you look at Rome too, it's sort of like a city of exiles. Like, half of the people that you meet there are people who sacrificed their previous life to come to Rome to make a living there. So it kind of seems like migration is a thing that we've been doing for a really long time, right? And I'm sure 2000 years ago, even if you just move like 50 miles away from where you were, that's like an ocean away in terms of how often you get to go back and how much you get to see the people that you grew up with.
I guess that's kind of the premise. The premise that I'm kind of like questioning in my head is like, Stella, you said like to be the most successful immigrants, like they're the ones that kill their parents, but like the success is what usually? It's like economic success. It's you move to start a business or for economic opportunity. But like you're just saying, like some people move out of the city to the country or to the cold place for some other reason. And they're also, in some sense, severing ties with where they came from. In the US, every small town person wants to go to either New York or LA, and they don't want to go back. So like success could look like a lot of different things to different people.
I think just happiness, honestly. You're going to be forever sad if you don't kill where you came from.
What I've always been curious about you, Stella, is like how you're so deep in the weeds in British politics, and that's your career. You said at the beginning,
Yeah.
it's like I can't go back because my career is here. I have to do this. This is my career. I said,
Mm.
you could go back. You would just have to leave your career. But you
It
care
is,
so much
I would
about
be living myself. I would be living myself.
what
If
I'm
I
kind
went
of
back to Greece, I would be living myself because I'm not just, people think about my career, so I'm a political commentator and I'm very involved in British politics. I'm a political person myself. I would like to be an MP myself. The British political system is fact that may never happen, but I see myself as a political actor, not as a journalist or whatever. And I'm not just a garden variety, social democrat, lefty, whatever. I'm a member of the Labour Party, of the British Labour Party. I want to see the British Labour Party succeed. I don't have this internationalist thing where I'm not an academic, I'm not a philosopher, I'm in the UK, I'm in London, I have an affinity with the British people. I want to see British people succeed and prosper. So
did
for me to go back, and I love Greece, I love Greece, I love Greek people, I love Greek culture. There are so many things I love about the country I came from. But for me to go back to Greece, I would need to become a different person. I would need to abandon the Stella who has studied the British parliamentary benches and who knows the problems of the British people and who feels very strongly about solving them. And I would have to go back and reconnect with something else inside me that I have suppressed.
Did the affinity for the Labour Party in Britain specifically come after you immigrated there?
Yeah.
Did?
Yeah. I
'Cause, like,
think
I
my
can't
affinity with
bring
British
myself
people
there.
started. My affinity with British people started earlier, but in a very subtle way. I wasn't as conscious about it. And I think it's because it started with when I started reading in English when I was a teenager, and it felt as if I was putting glasses on for the first time, like as if I could, reading in English felt the same way that now that we have phones and all of these things, and you feel like, oh, if I'm looking at a book, it's boring. Whereas if I'm looking at a phone, it has all of these things. That's how it felt for me when I first started reading English. It just felt so much more interesting. And because I was reading a lot of English literature, I was reading a lot of, Jane Austen and Charles Dickens. So I was reading about British people being poor and miserable and the class system and all of that. And I was like, oh my God, British people, they're so They need someone to save them.
Need me to help save them.
Obviously, that wasn't conscious, but yeah, basically, it created an emotional blueprint for me.
So interesting.
For Stella, it's kind of interesting for me hearing you say this because my uncle married a Greek woman in South Africa. She's in her 70s now. She left Greece in the 60s. Somehow they ended in South Africa. She lived in South Africa till the early 2000s. Then they moved to Australia. And then she lived in Australia. And now she's kind of eventually ended up moving back to Greece in her 70s. And it's funny how she kind of went full circle. And it does feel like occasionally, well, it's not unusual for people to go full circle and come back eventually.
I
And
could
then
retire. I could retire in Greece. I don't know if I fall in love with a Greek man, which hasn't happened yet ever. So that would be a surprise. But I'm not saying, I mean, I would do everything for love, let's begin with that. But apart from that, I can't see how I would be doing that anytime soon. I just don't have something pulling with it.
I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm assuming that in the Stella of 3 or 4 decades away, trying to guess, could be a very different person to the Stella of today.
Yeah. I'm 31, so.
Ooh, same.
I have a question for you, Stella. As a second generation immigrant, something that I've brought up to my mom is moving far away from her, for, job opportunities and actually for dating because the West Coast is just like a lot better, I think, if you're like a woman who wants to date other women. Um, and she was really supportive and understanding about it. Because she's been on the other side of that, having moved away from China, and she was just like, yeah, you got to do what you got to do, right? Like you're the right age for it. You're still young. I can sort of like, like I'm going to be self-sufficient for like another decade or something. It'll be nice if you move back a little bit later, but for now, this seems like a good thing for you to do. And I'm also curious about, like the you 20, 30 years away, like if you had like a child and then they said to you, I want to move and like be an immigrant and like go away from where you are, how do you think you would react to that?
Yeah, of course it is difficult. Yeah, I would. I think I would react like your mother, and I'm so glad to hear that she's been so understanding because that's not what a lot of parents are like. My mother has been complaining nonstop for the last 13 years that I'm a bad daughter who has abandoned them, and that letting me come here was the biggest mistake of your life. But I think that with your kids, like you have to just let them do whatever you want, whatever they want. And honestly, if they want to live, if I'm living in London, I don't think that London at the moment is not the most, it's not the most perfect place. I do not know what it will look like in 20, 30 years time. But you don't, you don't get to choose. You don't get to choose what your child does once they are 18. And it is, I now understand more why my mom has been so, desperate about this and so sad about the fact that I left. And she is right, but it doesn't feel like a choice to me. And I assume for you as well, you didn't take this choice lightly.
Yeah, I'm still deciding actually. I currently live in like my college town, which is like 2 or 3 hours away from where she lives in Toronto. But like something that I'm like seriously considering for the future is if I want to if I want to apply for jobs in like the Bay or Vancouver and move further away. And it it is genuinely like a very difficult choice. I remember even when I went on internships, to another city that was 6 hours away by car, and instead of visiting once a month, I like basically didn't see her for 4 months. And when I came back, she had visibly aged, which is not an experience that I had before. And like the first time that that happened, it was devastating to me. And I like that just sounds like very difficult to only see her a couple times a year and actually just see that change in her every single time.
Yeah, I had the same. I've had the same with my parents, and that's why, like, I'm gonna go. I'm so busy at the moment, and I'm gonna visit them for 4 days next week, and it's because I now every time I go back, I can see them becoming more tired, becoming more old, And you realize that, oh, my life is passing me by. And the older you grow, of course, time passes faster. And my parents are not in my life. My parents are not a part of my daily life. And it's heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking for me, and it's even more heartbreaking for them, right? It's really heartbreaking for our parents that they have their kids and they're for them the most important thing in their life, and they don't have that on their day-to-day life.
I'm really curious if this is a distance question or a culture question, because I can imagine that in the US or like another really big country like Canada, like if you're in Vancouver and your child moves to Montreal, that almost is like a different country. Or if you're in, I don't know, Miami and your child moves to Seattle, that's like really far away. That's like multiple time zones, climates, a whole different arena.
It's
I
very
wish I had like such good examples from like Russia or Brazil, but I'm sure, or South Africa for that matter. But it's, you know, it's kind of about distance, right? Because if somebody's like in Bratislava and their child works in Vienna, that's like a 40-minute bus ride. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people do that. It almost counts as commuting. Whereas in a big country, you can have these really vast distances.
No, it's I think like the culture is kind of crazy. Like I visit my parents once a month and this is like I think very unusual in terms of like, you know, like American or like Canadian culture.
Yeah.
I have friends with parents who lived 40 minutes away and they would see them twice a year. Like when they were going to school and this was just normal. And I think this is just how some people expect to live their lives.
was gonna say, like, in some strains of American culture, including the one I think I came from, we almost have like the opposite cultural value as you, Stella, and maybe some other people. It's like my stepmother's parents told her they had to move at least 100 miles away when they were 18, like as a way to instill independence. And yes, parents are sad. I mean, I'm a parent, my kid's 15. He's a bit far away right now. I'm kind of sad, but my like inherited cultural value is more like this kid needs to follow his independence and his dreams and like go wherever in the world he needs to go. That's how my parents felt about me too. Whenever I left and went and moved very far away across the country and everything.
I think I'd say it's similar for the sides of my family and their friends on the British and Portuguese sides who left Britain and Portugal and went out to the colonies. In the sense of it was just like we going to South Africa or going to Australia or going to go Mozambique or Angola. It was just like the done thing. So you'll go very, very far away, but no matter how far you go, I will always be your mother and you will always be my daughter, that kind of thing. So like, yeah, they'll see you maybe once a year, once every 5 years or something, but you know, still family.
They say that this has something to do with inheritance law, like we just did the Tocqueville reading group on Inheritance Act, and one of the main arguments that Tocqueville is making, according to which, you know, this is like why American equality works as well as it does, is that it's not an inheritance-based society the way that the UK was in Tocqueville's time. And, you know, it exists, this idea exists in so many different anthropological areas of research. Alice Evans is currently researching this with regard to gender equality, that the first son inheriting and the second, third sons having to leave to find their luck somewhere else. And if you don't have that kind of continuity, success is succession, where you have to inherit the family shop, the family restaurant, the family business, then the kind of natural instinct is to send the kids away to really happen upon their luck.
Simon, I have a question just because you brought it up. You have a child who's 15. How do you, are you also planning on sending them away in 3 years? And how do you feel about that?
Are you talking? Oh, you're talking to
Yeah.
me? Yeah, I mean, I went to boarding school at my own request when I was 13. And my son, I think, is actually quite similar in a way. Like he just needs to follow his independence. I mean, he's already flying internationally by himself and making connections and stuff. It's not that I'm sending him anywhere. It's just like he wants to go do certain things.
Wow.
I'm kind of like sad that he's not living with me, but I feel, and this is my inherited American cultural baggage, right? Like, I feel that I need to encourage that independence in him. You know, it's like how I think of as being a good parent.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So it sounds like your son is already very independent and out to do things. Why do you feel like you need to further encourage it instead of just being like, I would like to see you a little bit more because I like you as a person and I want to hang out?
Yeah. I mean, like, what's the way Stella describes her family, I'm like, but if I did that, I would feel like I was guilt tripping my son.
Mm.
If I did anything other than what I'm doing, I would feel that I would be guilt tripping him. Like, are you not thinking of your father's well-being? You know, like, why don't
Yeah,
you?
that's what my parents do.
Yeah. And I feel like really bad doing that.
Huh.
Yeah.
I always felt that a weird weird type of bad luck in life is to be too close to one parent. Many of my friends who I feel should have ventured farther away just happened to be extremely unlucky and have amazing moms who are their best friends, and it's impossible to leave. And I think eventually neither benefits too much. I mean, unless your parent is actually like really sick and needs you, I think both would have benefited. And I always kind of cherish that my mom is also kind of insane. That puts just that healthy little distance between us that's needed for not being on the same continent. But if you happen to have two amazing parents, that's also not as good as it looks in the long run. There has to be a little bit of at least difference of opinions, I think, kind of counterintuitively. But I want to go back to the going back question, actually, because we talked about the selfishness or selflessness of leaving. I do think that, Stella, you benefit the most from immigration, but actually it's not your mother that suffers the most, it's you. And one of the weird aspects of being an immigrant, first generation immigrant, is that you both suffer, you are both the sufferer and the beneficiary of this thing, and you have to hold this gigantic ambiguity. But it's true that some people that we leave behind only get the suffering part. I do think that it's another a complete arena of dubiousness when it comes to political immigration and the question of what is up to what point you're staying, trying to change the system, and what is the point where you will leave, which was kind of the case for me. And I think the third area of ambivalence is going back. And how many people are telling me that, it's so hard to have children in London. It's so hard to have children in San Francisco. It's so hard to have children even in Berlin versus a smaller German town if you happen to be living in Germany. People sometimes go back right after arrival. Sometimes people move back for the grandparents when they have had children. And sometimes people go back for retirement, right? This is not counting the expats, just the immigrants. I think with regard to the children, it's another very interesting area of moral ambivalence, because if you're in a better country, wouldn't you want that for your children? But when they are small, you would benefit from the grandparents being there. So you again have all these different layers. And I'm really like inviting everybody here, and would love to hear from Stella, like what might be some good ways to hold ourselves honest, keep ourselves honest here, hold ourselves accountable. Like what would be moral questions that we should ask ourselves when making these decisions, when being tempted, move back, move away, retire? How should we approach this? I know the libertarian argument, but like everything else.
See, because I'm not a libertarian. So for me, the reason why I question it so much is because the thing I value the most is humans. So that's why I question it. I'm thinking, was this the right choice for me? What have I gained? What have I lost? And yeah, you only have one life to live, and you can answer that question many ways. You can answer that I only have one life to live. I want to spend it like tasting everything life has to offer, or you can say I only have one life to live. I want to spend as much time as possible with the people that mean the most to me, and the things that mean the most to me. And for me, the things that mean the most to me my relationships, my community, things like that. Alienation is not a worthy price to pay. But at the same time, I'm a person who makes meaning a lot. So I do make a lot of meaning out of the things that I do here in London. And yeah, I'm just the things that the way that the compromise that I make is, okay, then now you're going to book tickets to go to Greece, even though you really do not have the time to do this, and it will mean that you're missing out on things, and you're gonna go and you're going to take your SIM out of your iPhone, and for 4 days you will not be picking up the phone, even if it is producers picking up, even if it is producers calling you, and you are, you know, you are stressed out about missing out on things. You're just gonna do that, and you're going to engulf yourself in your parents' company.
What are your thoughts, Stella, on like you having children if you want to? Like, do you think that like how will your mother be as a grandparent in this scenario? Do you see yourself like taking the children home often, ensuring that they have a Greek life as well? Speak
Well, yeah,
language?
that's another thing. I would love to have kids. I do not know whether it's going to happen for me because dating is an absolute hellscape in my age bracket. But I would love to have kids, and my parents would be amazing grandparents, even though my mom is insane. She would be an amazing grandmother because she wouldn't get to do the shit. She wouldn't pull the kind of shit she pulls with me with her grandkids. And absolutely, I would want them to spend as much time as possible in Greece. Like, absolutely. I would go so far as to say, you know, I've been thinking a lot about sending my kids into the education system in the UK, and because I haven't come out of it, it's really hard for me because I don't know it and I'm scared of it. Like I would literally feel more comfortable sending my kids to school in Greece, which is such a typical, you know, small-minded immigrant thing to say, but it just feels scary not sending them into the wild unknown of the British education system, which I probably will have to do, but you know.
Would love to hear. I know, Trey, you're traveling. Faridun, do you have any questions, any comments?
Sorry, I've been mostly listening. This is just like all very
No need. This is not pressure. Just we want to
no,
make
no,
sure
no.
that everybody gets their say.
Yeah, no, this is all just like I'm from Turkey and I live in New York now. And this is Stella's experience sounds extremely familiar to me, just like especially with my mom specifically. And this is the reason why I wanted to come to this talk was just like this is something I've been thinking a lot recently. I'm 32 and the main instigator for this has been just like parents aging and noticing that more and more recently. So I don't know it's been just like fun to listen to the perspective. And I guess the only question I have is like
How is your mother handling you not being in Turkey? How is that going?
she does not handle it well. It's a lot of guilt tripping. It's a lot of guilt tripping, and sometimes it's work. I think I generally feel like I had a little bit like of like kind of ignored the guilt tripping piece and just like not really kind of suppress it. But I know I think it like occasionally works. And it's been difficult to kind of sometimes justify, especially because right now I'm just like not working. I'm fun employed, which is honestly incredible. And a lot of the reasons, or like a lot of the justification for me being here has always been just like my career is here, which it is, and it's kind of hard to do what I do in Turkey. But I feel like I'm a little bit early in my journey of like killing my parents or whatever. So I'm just kind of curious, like um both Anna and I guess everyone else and Stella, what that journey has been like. I mean, I understand like the end state, and the end state is just like I feel pretty selfish, and I'm just like generally okay with it at the moment. But yeah, like what has been that like?
I'm mourning. I mean, I'm mourning. I've been mourning my parents, and that's why I write the kind of really soppy, melancholic stuff that I do. That's the phase I'm at. Like, I'm literally acting as if my parents, like, I'm just feeling very sad. I think about my parents and I'm feeling very sad. I cry often. It's not a happy place, but it is, it's the full spectrum of the human experience, and you just have to just suck it up and feel it. And it's evidence of being sad about losing something is evidence that you had something that is worth being sad over. So, don't know.
Like you kill your parents and then you mourn them. But the other option is, and actually this is helpful for certain communities. I had Sarah Hayder on my podcast a couple of months ago, maybe half a year ago. And she grew up in Texas in this Pakistani community, and it was quite monolingual. And for her parents, they are still decades later with adult children, grandchildren, they are still just integrating into America. And it's so interesting how sometimes you meet older people in America who don't speak English, and they maybe came when they were 3 years old, and they just, because this is such a big and beautiful and diverse country, you can actually like live your whole life with the diaspora of where you're from. When I lived in Brussels, there was a big Budapest diaspora. I'm sure it exists in New York as well. I just don't look them up. But in Brussels, it's a very important little community. And a lot of people only live their lives in there. They marry each other, they have children. And it's a little bit like Berlin has a Budapest community as well. London used to have it. I don't know now. I think after Brexit that has changed. And I think that's another kind of immigration where you never really leave. You actually bring your parents with you, you don't kill them. And then you become almost like a little pod inside wider society. And I think what that does is basically moves the difficulty down a generation. And if you listen to the podcast with Sarah Hayder, she had to do the real immigration, even though the parents had done it for her. But then you ask, like, is she really second generation, or is this a different kind of first generation, where she's still translating for the parents and things like that? You see that a lot with second generation immigrant kids who become the linguists of the family and then have to basically parent their own parents, do the administration for them. How many children here have to do their parents' green card applications and all of those things? It's there are so many different layers, and the fact that there is something so fundamental about immigration as a kind of existential experience that it really upends entire hierarchies. For instance, within the family, right? Like you have a very traditional society say, hi dog, we love inter-intel pets, and bring them on. You have maybe a very traditional society, and the children go to the rich nearby country, send home the money. So now who is the provider, right? You have, I mean, even in mafia stories you hear about, these Eastern European villages from which the women are sent out to be sex workers somewhere, and they send the money home, but still the husband thinks that he's the boss. And you have all these little twists, and I think this is why I love the Kill Your Parents summary, and why it's so beautiful and poetic, because it summarizes that in almost every immigration story there is some weird contradiction. There's always a not. May that be a colonial country that doesn't exist anymore. May that be a linguistic difference. May that be family hierarchy turned upside down. Who's teaching who? And especially today, when we have this enormous technological delta in families, with like the mobile first young people and the parents who are still getting familiar with attaching files to an email that only works for the fourth time, or double clicking things, the children having a much wider geographical experience as well, and linguistic experience really augments this difference, right? Because now you have young people who are not just technologically literate, but also they have all these other secondary experiences. And I want to hear more about the parenting question. I think we are losing parenting literacy in our times. There are fewer children being born. People are becoming parents later. People are living far away from their own parents. And I wish we spoke more about being children. I mean, we are children our whole lives, even when our parents are gone, right? We are always their children. They are the original founders of you as a startup. They will always be there on the masthead there. And you know, your parenting experiences, whether that's you as a leader in your community, in your company, or you actually having biological children, who are you responsible for, and how do you negotiate those differences? I feel like, I mean, I sometimes write about this in my, you know, on my blog and on my new blog, American Innocence. There will be a lot about this. I often find, and this is why I was so glad to see your piece, Stella, because so much of this is just has not been written down. It's almost it's a kind of taboo, and everybody feels alone with these thoughts. And then you actually bring people together and you realize, like, no, it's actually the same for everybody. We just don't talk about it.
It's people's most painful. It's one of the most painful things, right? Especially if your relationship with your family is not perfect. It's just not something that I have realized this thing the older I grow, that people don't like, people will say that they want to hear about the things that make you sad and all of these things and the things that make you weak, but really they kind of take distance from you when you start exposing these sort of wounds. People prefer being around people who are from very happy, healthy family homes and who are very well supported and who is just nicer. It's just more pleasant. It taps into our instinct for survival.
If I
I
draw
did,
on my, sorry, Jen.
sorry, go on.
If I draw on the experiences of the generations, like for me, moving to York was great. I love it. And I think my parents were very happy moving from South Africa to the UK because of crime. And then for them, at least the second time, the first time, it was great for my mum getting out of Mozambique as it was sort of with the colonial wars and then particularly the Civil War. And then for my dad, that he left because he didn't want to go to the South African army. And then his parents and their parents, they sort of left Britain and Portugal because of poor or because of to avoid repression in Portugal's case. And just for each of them, like moving was great. Like they got freedom. They in some cases they got better weather. Like they're all it was great. And with my mum, she had a difficult relationship with her parents because her dad was like very traditional Portuguese, macho. It was really funny. My grandfather flirted with my girlfriend when I was 19. He was 80 and he just like went up to her and was like, Hola, I am Engenheiro Armando Monteiro, and kissed her on both cheeks. And I was just like, oh, that must have been really hard for you when he wasn't an 80-year-old man to my mum. So she hated that. And I don't know, just like for each generation, it was a great thing moving. So for me, I feel it's really interesting to hear all this because it's a very different experience.
I was just gonna say about the having kids and raising kids issue. I'm kind of talking out of my ass here a little bit, but I did recently learn that like fertility in cities have always been net negative. And I think about how even when I was growing up, right? Like in my third grade, sociology textbook, it was like, oh, in Canada, it's 30% rural and 70% urban, and that number has just ticked up and up. And at some point when I was in middle school or high school, like the entire world went from being more than 50% rural to more than 50% urban. We might not have like you're talking about the loss of knowledge here, and it's real, and it might just sort of be because like this sort of thing has like literally never happened before, right? So many of us in cities, and I think about like Watership Down and its supposedly accurate depiction of like rabbits and how female rabbits, when they're in a warren that's like too crowded, they reabsorb their babies. Like they have an instinct where they will just not have kids. Um, and I have no idea whatsoever if something like this happens for humans. But I like sometimes I think about it. I'm like,
Yeah.
is there something here? Just like, you have to move away into like the suburbs of like the Netherlands or whatever. You have to move away into like small town, Saskatchewan in order to have kids. And if we just stay in cities, we're just gonna be doomed. And we might take that bargain because living in cities is pretty great. So yeah.
Yeah, it's because cities are so distracting and there's so many great things to do all the time. So, a lot of people
That's
are
where
like,
you find your partner. You go to the city
You
to get
move out.
hitched,
Yeah.
and then you move to a calmer place, suburb, wherever you want, where there are trees and your kid can grow up.
Yeah, that sounds awful. I'm just gonna
The problem is people don't get hitched. To go back
Yeah.
to Ed Evans, I will tell her that we discussed her intensity today, thanks to me. If people don't get hitched, it's hard to make babies when you're not hitched.
No, it's not.
That's where I think should be solved.
Actually not that hard, I was
Just on
never.
just on the parenting point of view, isn't it the case that each generation has to learn to parent from scratch because it changes every generation? Like my grandparents' parenting advice is useless because it didn't cover smartphones. And their grandparents' parenting advice would be useless, but even more useless because it didn't cover electricity.
We all inherit a lot from our parents, right? Like a lot of scripts that are our default scripts. I feel like we inherited from our parents. Like,
Sure, but they were figuring it out as they went along. We get the improvisation.
It's great for therapy. I think there would be no therapy industry at this scale if our parents hadn't been so laissez-faire about their own parenting. We will see what happens with our generation as kids. Guys, we're getting to the end point of the salon. I feel like we inspired Stella to write something else. I can see it in her eyes. There's a new essay coming up. We could do this regularly. Like we could like hold this little group together as a kind of group therapy and come together every once in a while to talk about a different aspect of immigration. Maybe we can do it a little bit later so poor Tom doesn't have to wake up at like 3:15 a.m. Like a morning TV show host and get a breakfast beforehand. I think there's a lot of things here. For instance, I would love to do one about expats. We didn't go fully down that rabbit hole. I think COVID completely changed what expat even means. There are all these people living all over the world. I mean, Russell, you have personal experience. I have personal experience. I was in Lisbon as a temporary immigrant amongst a lot of expats, so I have seen it. I also, saw what it does to the locals, which can be good or bad. Another very ambivalent question. So maybe later this year we could do an expats versus immigrants salon. If you guys are up for it, what do you think? We could bring in somebody who moved to Greece as an expat to like battle it out with Stella,
yes.
and I will moderate.
I would love
Invite
to
your
hear
mom.
something
We
like
should
that.
invite your mom.
Oh my God, no, she's doing so. And she can't really speak English. Like she can say some stuff, but she
But
can't.
now there is the Google earbuds, the Meta earbuds that translate.
She just can't really take it seriously.
All right, no moms, only those affected are allowed to show up, and we will do an expats versus immigrants salon. And I will look up some literary text as well, because when you say immigrants versus expats, suddenly all the world literature opens up for you, from Hemingway to Steinbeck, and you can read some really, really good texts. Oh yeah.
Never done.
We'll fight a lot about
I will create like a free ticket that you can only send to your moms. We had a salon once where people brought their moms. I don't remember what it was. I think it was an Anna Karenina.
Bring your mom to salon day.
We have a bring your own child. Like we have a parents series. So why not do a mom series? Guys, lots of love. This was fabulous. Stella, you're the best. Please continue writing your beautiful.
This was so nice, guys. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I was
thank you
late.
for coming. Haven't seen it in ages. I will respond to your email. I received it. I read it. Yeah, biggest hugs. And guys, I will see you at another salon hopefully soon.
See you guys.
Bye.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye. Ciao, ciao.